The silence in our living room felt heavier than usual that Sunday morning. I walked in with my coffee, expecting the usual hum of weekend life, pans clinking in the kitchen, footsteps on the stairs, maybe even the distant sound of the TV playing one of Zoe's cheesy teen dramas. But it was quiet, still, off. At first, I thought maybe they were still asleep. But then something caught my eye. I looked up at the large photo above the fireplace, the one from our Yosemite trip last summer. The image was still there, but something was wrong. I stepped closer. That's when I saw it. I was missing. Not just from that photo. Every framed picture on the walls, the shelves, the staircase, each one had been carefully altered, cropped, replaced. In some, I'd simply been cut out. In others, my face had been obscured or swapped out completely. What had once been moments of joy now felt like surgical edits, like I'd been erased from my own family's story. I stood there, mug in hand, staring at the empty spaces where I used to be. The longer I looked, the more I realized this wasn't some mistake. This was deliberate. That's when I heard the door to Zoe's room open upstairs. Her footsteps were slow, hesitant. She paused at the top of the stairs. I didn't move, didn't say a word. Eventually, she came down, phone in hand, and walked past me toward the kitchen without a glance. "Morning," I said, my voice calm but carrying weight. She didn't respond. 3 years. That's how long I'd been in Zoe's life. I never tried to replace her dad. I just wanted to be there. I helped her with homework, sat through those awful school plays, stayed up late when she had a bad dream. I didn't expect gratitude, but I hoped for something. Lately she'd been distant, moody, normal teenage stuff, or so I thought. But last week it started getting cruel, dismissive. One night, I offered to help with a science project she was struggling with, and she shot me a look that stopped me cold. "Stop pretending to care. You're not my real dad." Those words stung, but I chalked it up to teenage hormones. Delilah, my wife, brushed it off too. "She's just going through something," she said. "Don't take it personally." But I was starting to. The tipping point came at dinner the night before. Zoe was texting under the table, even though we had a no-phones rule at dinner. When I reminded her, she slammed the phone down and shouted, "God, why do you always have to be so controlling? Why don't you just go away already?" I turned to Delilah, hoping for backup, hoping she'd step in. What she said instead broke me. "Maybe we'd all be better off if you did." Just like that. No emotion, no hesitation. I looked at both of them. The girl I'd tried to love like my own, the woman I married, the home I built with quiet effort and steady hands. And I realized I wasn't wanted. Not really. Maybe I never had been. So I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, "Okay." Then I walked upstairs, packed a bag, and drove to my friend Ben's house. He didn't ask questions, just gave me the guest room key and poured me a beer. This morning, when I woke up and turned on my phone, there were 13 missed calls. 8 from Delilah, 4 from Zoe, 1 from my sister. I haven't returned any of them yet. Right now, I'm sitting by the window in Ben's guest room, staring at the phone and wondering what hurts more, being told to leave or realizing they meant it. Ben left for work early the next morning, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the quiet hum of his fridge. I tried focusing on some freelance paperwork I'd brought with me, but my eyes kept drifting to my phone. 14 missed calls now. The latest was from Delilah. No voicemail, just a silence that buzzed louder than anything she could have said. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed my keys and headed out. Needed air, clarity. I stopped at a diner I used to go to before I moved in with Delilah. Familiar faces, simple eggs and toast, no judgment. I was halfway through my coffee when I opened Zoe's Instagram out of habit. There she was, smiling in a new photo, arm around a man I hadn't seen in years. The caption read, "Real family time." The man? Her biological father, Mark. The same Mark who missed 6 birthdays in a row. The same Mark who stopped paying child support 2 years ago and vanished to start a new life in Colorado. Now he was suddenly back, smiling no less. And suddenly, everything made sense. The coldness, the resentment, the photos with me cut out. Mark was back, and he was rewriting history. With Delilah's help or not, I couldn't yet tell. I scrolled down and found an older post from 2 weeks ago I hadn't noticed. A blurry photo of a restaurant in town. Tag at @MarkScoreC22. Location, Riverstone Grill. Same city, same man. He'd been around for weeks. They just hadn't told me. I stared at the screen until the waitress came to top off my coffee. "Rough morning?" she asked kindly. "You could say that." I drove to the park after breakfast, the one where Zoe used to beg me to push her higher on the swings. I sat on the same bench where Delilah and I once watched her run barefoot across the grass, giggling like the world couldn't touch her. That felt like a different life. At noon, my sister Erin showed up at Ben's place, letting herself in with the spare key Ben had given her years ago when they dated briefly. She brought coffee, a sandwich, and that look she gets when she's about to say something I won't like. "I saw Zoe at the mall yesterday," she said, handing me the cup. She was with Mark. My grip tightened slightly, but I didn't say anything. She didn't see me. But, Thomas, she looked happy. Not forced, genuinely hopeful, like she thinks he's changed. I sighed. Maybe he has. "You don't believe that," she said, sitting beside me. "You remember what he did to Delilah, to Zoe, the disappearing act, the lies, and now he's back just as you're pushed out?" I nodded. "Yeah, the timing isn't exactly subtle. She doesn't know better. She wants her dad. She wants to believe." We sat in silence for a while before she added, "Delilah texted me, said you're being dramatic, that it was just a rough night and you're overreacting." I laughed bitterly. She agreed with Zoe, told me maybe they'd be better off without me. "That's not a rough night, Erin. That's a choice." Erin didn't argue. She just handed me her phone. "You should see this." It was another post from Zoe, a story this time, college brochures spread across her bed. Caption, "Big changes ahead, real paths, real family." A clear echo of something I'd heard years ago, when Mark had come back the first time, full of big promises and bigger lies. I looked out the window. "She's going to throw away everything we built." Erin touched my arm. "Then maybe it's time you reminded her who actually helped her build it." I didn't respond, but that night I charged my phone and opened the voicemail from Delilah for the first time. "Thomas," her voice cracked, "you need to come home. There's something you don't know. It's about Mark and Zoe. Please." I sat with those words until midnight, then finally packed a bag of documents, memories, and receipts. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I was done being erased from my own story. I arrived at Ridgewood High just before 8:30 the next morning. The hallways buzzed with teenage energy, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, fragments of conversation bouncing off walls. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there because something didn't sit right. And I needed answers. Miss Chambers, Zoe's guidance counselor, met me outside her office. A kind woman in her 50s with reading glasses always hanging around her neck. She looked at me with concern before even speaking. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "What's going on?" I asked, voice steady but tight. She didn't waste time. Yesterday, Zoe submitted withdrawal forms for 3 of her AP classes. She's also requested to drop from French club, yearbook, and peer mentorship. When I asked why, she said she's transferring schools. I blinked. Transferring? Where? She didn't say, not directly, but she asked me to send transcripts to 3 schools, all in California. My pulse quickened. "Let me guess, Sacramento, Santa Cruz, and Ventura?" She raised an eyebrow. "Yes, how did you know?" I leaned back, jaw tight. Her biological father, Mark, just bought property in Ventura. He's been back in town for weeks, apparently, reconnecting. Miss Chambers gave a sad nod. "That would explain a lot. Zoe's grades have been slipping slightly. Not enough to trigger any formal warnings yet, but enough to raise concerns. And her demeanor, she's withdrawn, less engaged. Honestly, she seems conflicted." I thanked her for the information, promised to stay in touch, and left feeling like I was sprinting uphill in wet cement. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This was grooming, manipulation. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the house I used to call home, my mind was spinning with questions. Delilah opened the door before I could knock. Her face was pale, eyes red like she hadn't slept. "He asked her to invest," she said immediately. "Mark, he told her if she used her college fund to buy in now, she'd triple it by graduation, that he needs family investors to launch his new startup." My stomach dropped. "Where is she?" "Getting coffee with him. Again." I walked into the kitchen and sat at the counter, the same spot where Delilah and I used to laugh over burnt pancakes and weekend plans. Now it felt like a crime scene. "Why didn't you tell me he was back?" I asked. "I thought I could manage it," she said, voice cracking. I didn't want to drag you back into all of this. Then you and Zoe had that fight, and she said those awful things, and I panicked. I thought if I pushed back too hard, I'd lose her. I didn't get the chance to respond. The front door opened, and Zoe walked in. She stopped short when she saw me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "You're here," she said flatly, dropping her keys on the side table. "I am." "Why?" "I think you know why." She crossed her arms. "Let me guess. You're here to tell me Mark's a liar, that I'm making a mistake, that I don't know what I'm doing?" I stood slowly and walked to the drawer where we kept household files. From inside my bag, I pulled out a stack of printed documents, credit reports, failed LLCs, court records, screenshots of social media aliases. I laid them on the counter, one by one. "I'm not here to tell you what to do," I said. "I'm here to show you what he's already done." Zoe stepped closer, scanning the documents. Her mouth tightened, her hands started to tremble as she recognized names and dates. And then she saw it, the pending lawsuit filed by the grandmother of another girl Mark had convinced to invest her tuition money in a fake startup. She looked up, eyes wet. "He said he'd changed." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Then she whispered, "He told me to remove you from our photos, that if I really wanted to move forward, I had to prove I'd chosen him." Delilah gasped softly. "He, what?" Zoe shook her head. "I think I knew, deep down, but I wanted to believe." She turned her phone off, slid it across the counter like it was tainted, and whispered, "I need time to think." We let her go upstairs in silence. Some battles are won with shouting matches. Others begin with truth laid bare on a kitchen counter. This one had only just started. That night, I didn't go back to Ryan's. I stayed in the guest room, the one that used to be a makeshift art studio before Zoe needed space to study for her AP exams. The air in the house was heavy with silence. Upstairs, I could hear Zoe pacing in her room, footsteps light and restless like she was carrying the weight of her choices on her shoulders. Delilah knocked gently on the door around 11 p.m. She looked exhausted, a cup of tea in her hands. "She hasn't said much," she murmured. "Just went quiet after dinner. I think she's ashamed." "She has every right to be confused, not ashamed," I said. "She was manipulated. Mark's good at that, always has been." Delilah sat at the edge of the bed. She asked me if I ever doubted you, if I believed what he said, that you wanted to push her out of our lives. I closed my eyes for a second. "What did you say?" "That I was wrong for ever standing by when she said those words to you. That I knew better. That watching you walk away was the worst moment of my life." We sat in silence. Then, softly, Delilah added, "You were the one who stayed, Thomas. Even when it got hard. You were the one she cried to at 2 a.m. when she failed her driving test. You were the one who taught her how to change a tire. And the one who drove 6 hours round trip when she forgot her debate script on competition day." "I didn't do it to earn a title," I replied. "I did it because I love her." The next morning, I was in the kitchen early, scrambling eggs when Zoe walked in. She didn't speak at first, just stood there in one of my old college hoodies, sleeves pulled over her hands like she used to do when she was little. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. I turned off the stove and faced her. "You don't owe me an apology, Zoe. Not for being hurt, not for being confused, but if you're ready to talk, I'm here." She sat down, eyes focused on the plate I placed in front of her, but not eating. He made it sound so real, you know? The business plan, the website, even the photos of the office. I thought, maybe this time he was telling the truth. "Mark knows exactly what to say to make people believe him," I said gently. "You're not the first. You just have something he didn't expect, the strength to stop him." She hesitated. Would you go with me to the dinner tonight? He wants to make some kind of announcement." I don't want to go alone." I nodded. "Of course." We arrived at the restaurant just after 6. Mark was already holding court, charming the other guests, mostly parents of Zoe's friends. As I watched him, I realized something. His confidence wasn't rooted in truth. It was in assumption. He thought he still had control. He greeted Zoe with open arms. She stepped back. I brought someone. He turned and his smile faltered when he saw me. "Thomas." I didn't respond. Dinner started and so did his pitch. Glossy pamphlets, buzzwords, promises of huge returns, all delivered with the ease of a practiced conman. I watched the other parents nod, some skeptical, some already convinced. Zoe leaned toward me and whispered, "Now?" I gave her a slight nod. She stood up slowly, her voice calm but clear. "Before you invest anything tonight, there's something you should see." She pulled out a folder and passed it down the table, copies of his lawsuits, business failures, and investor complaints. A hush fell over the room. Mark's face went pale. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You've been poisoned against me." "No," she said, louder now. "I finally saw you for who you are, and I'm not letting you ruin anyone else's future." At that moment, 2 investigators from the DA's office entered the restaurant. Mark stood abruptly, but it was too late. As they escorted him out, he looked back at Zoe, face twisted with disbelief. "You betrayed your own father." She stood tall. "No, I protected my family." And for the first time in a long time, I saw her clearly, not as a teenager lost between 2 worlds, but as a young woman choosing the right one. The days following Mark's arrest were a whirlwind of reporters, statements, and phone calls from families who had nearly been swindled by him. Some had already given him money, others had come close. I spent most of my time helping investigators sort through Zoe's evidence and forwarding every piece of documentation I had. But when the noise died down, when the headlines shifted to something newer and shinier, we were left with what mattered most, the quiet rebuilding of what we had nearly lost. Zoe started therapy again, not because we pushed her into it, but because she asked. "I want to figure out why I kept falling for his promises," she said one evening, sitting across from me on the couch with her knees pulled to her chest. "And I want to make sure I don't repeat the cycle." Delilah and I exchanged a glance. We were both proud of her, but there was a shadow of sadness too. No teenager should have to process betrayal at that level. That same week, Zoe reopened her college application portal. I caught her late one night on her laptop, biting her thumbnail as she edited an essay. When I asked if she needed help, she hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. It started, "The man I once called my real dad nearly cost me everything. But the man who truly showed me what family means sat across from me as I found the strength to stop him." I read it slowly. Every word carried weight. Every sentence reflected growth. "You sure you want to write about this?" I asked gently. She nodded. "I don't want to hide from it. I want schools to know who I am, what I've come through." We spent that evening workshopping the essay together, adding context, cleaning grammar, keeping her voice intact. She ended it with a single line that still stays with me. "Sometimes you don't find your strength until you're standing beside the person who never gave up on you." 2 weeks later, Delilah invited me to dinner. Just the 3 of us. No drama, no tension, just family. She made her famous roast chicken, Zoe set the table, and I brought a bottle of wine that had been gathering dust in Ryan's cabinet. We laughed that night. Real laughter, not the nervous kind we'd been faking for months. At one point, Zoe excused herself and came back with something in her hands, a photo frame. It was the same one from Yellowstone, the one that had hung above the fireplace, now whole again. My image had been reprinted, carefully cut and placed back into the scene between Delilah and Zoe, just like it had been originally. "I thought we could rehang this," she said, eyes soft. I took the frame from her and looked at it. There was a time when I thought I might never be part of this family again, but here it was, proof that healing was possible. That night before bed, Delilah stopped me in the hallway. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up. On her, on me." "We all needed time to see things clearly," I replied. "Some things only come into focus after you step back." Zoe was accepted into 2 of her top schools, both with scholarships. She's leaning toward one close to home, though. "Not because I don't want space," she clarified, "but because I've finally figured out where I belong." Next month, she'll give a statement at Mark's sentencing. She's already drafted it, but she asked me to read it with her the night before, just in case she needs support. Delilah and I are still figuring things out. Therapy, patience, honesty. It's not perfect, but it's real. And for the first time in a long while, that feels like enough. Real family isn't about blood or biology. It's about presence, protection, and staying when things get hard. And in this house, we're building that kind of family. One conversation, one act of trust, one day at a time.